So today we want to do a couple power shutdowns. We're going to set the combine for dry corn. We're roughly 240 bushel an acre, 13 or 14, 15% moisture. We just want to talk about how we go about setting the combine and walk you through a power shutdown and some of the adjustments that we'll do based on what we see coming out of the combine and the corn head.
So guys, again, this is one set of conditions. We're in 230, 240 corn. It's 15%. You might think, well, that's pretty easy to set a combine in those conditions, and most of the time it is. However, the thought process, the method that we're going to use can be applied no matter if it's high moisture corn, if it's dry corn, or any other crop for that matter. But right now we're focused on corn. And again, we're out here. It's late October. The crop is dry, and again, it is easier to set in dry corn than what it would be in wetter corn. But again, the method, the thought process, some of the numbers may not end up the same if you're in wet corn, but the thought process, the method to get to the final solution is going to be the same. So hopefully you learned something from this. We've got several other videos in the series that we want you to look at, such as the making sure your concaves are zeroed and leveled, your chaffer and sieve calibration, and some others within the series that we want you to go check out to get prepared before you go to the field, because all those things are going to make a huge difference. So if you don't have all those things done correctly, coming out here and actually getting the combine set is going to be difficult. So again, check out those other videos. Make sure that pre-harvest work is done, and we wish you and your family a very successful harvest.
That's right. And one other thing I'd like to mention that about this is a couple tools you can have right from your cell phone. The Equipment Plus app, it's going to have a good loss calculator, other stuff that we talked through, inside and outside combine settings, all kinds of valuable information in that Equipment Plus app, along with the Sloan Support app. A lot of these videos will be found through the Sloan Support app and a lot of other information there as well. So good luck. All right, so we're going along here. We made our initial pass through the field. We saw a little bit of loss on the ground. We're running the combine right up close to the power meter at the top of the green. Our initial settings are 340 on the rotor, 22 on the concave, 1270 on the fan, 19 and 14 on our sieve and chaffer. We're going to do a power shutdown. We're going to get out and look. We're going to talk about what we want to see on the ground, where our loss might be coming from. We don't show too much on the loss monitor, but we need to calibrate that to get that into shape. So we're going to do a power shutdown. Key thing is you don't want to just turn the key off, get out, lock the park brake up, and we'll damage the transmission. So we're going to talk about how we're going to do that. We're going to go to low idle. We're going to flip our switches, and we're going to bring our hydro handle into neutral. So we're going to do that right now. All right, so that's how we do a power shutdown. We're going to get out and we're going to look and see what kind of loss we have out on the ground. All right, so we just did our power shutdown. I want to talk about what a power shutdown is and why it's so beneficial. So a power shutdown captures that combine in a moment of time when it's full, so we can know exactly where our loss is and how our combine and head are performing. We'll look at our pre-harvest loss. We'll look behind the head. We'll look behind the combine, raise the chopper, look at shoe distribution. There's a lot of things you can learn during a power shutdown. So the first thing we want to look at is the pre-harvest loss and to make sure we don't have no loss coming in from the previous pass. So we walk up here. We don't see too much corn on the ground, but we do have some ear corn that's broke off, that's laying down here on the ground, kind of like this. So we got to take that into account when we look at our loss on the ground. This is a chopping corn head, so you might see some free grain on the ground where maybe that snout could pick up that ear, and we're going to have some loss that way. It might look like head loss, but that's what we do with the power shutdown, try to determine where that came from.
So we're going to walk on back here behind the head, and we want to look behind the head. So we know if we look directly behind the head after doing a power shutdown, if it's directly behind the head, we know it's not coming through the combine. So if we walk over here in behind the combine and we look, so we've cleared out a few spots here on the ground, and you can see that we do have some header loss. So we are getting some header loss. Again, as we said before, this is dry corn, so it does have a tendency to shell at the head some. You can also look in here. We look behind this row. Now we can look in here behind this row, and you will notice that we do have some header loss. Now, the things that can cause header loss could be your deck plate opening, it could be your header speed, like Chris talked about. It could be some ears that were down on the ground that the snouts didn't pick up. They hit those chopping knives. Those chopping knives are going to scatter that grain off of that ear. Now, what causes that header loss is as that ear, we can bring the camera in close here, as that ear comes down, it can hit the deck plates, and if that deck plate spacing is too wide, it'll cause this what we call butt shelling. Okay, so if that ear comes down, again, header speed can cause this also if you have your header running way too fast. If it's jerking that thing down too hard or your deck plate spacing's too wide, it'll actually cause that to butt shell. So with drier corn, it's definitely susceptible to that, more so than in wet corn. The kernels are usually easier to come off the cob. And so that was the adjustment that we made, is we tightened those deck plates up to try to reduce the amount of butt shelling that we had. Now, header speed, again, like I said, is critical to make sure that that doesn't happen as well. So what you're looking for deck plate spacing and header speed, you want that deck plate spacing open enough to where you can easily get the stalk in between the deck plates. Otherwise, you get a jamming or a log jam up in here, and you can't get the stalk in, and you'll start to see you'll push those stalks over, and you can have lost ears in that scenario. But you want to have it open enough to get the stalk in there, but yet when I have that ear come down, I'm not getting that butt shelling. So header speed, what we're looking for is we want that stalk to be grabbed by the stalk rolls, and we want it to be pulled down to where that ear snaps off about halfway up the deck plates. If you see it snapping off up here, you're probably running your header speed a little high. If it's waiting until clear back here, you may be running your header speed a little bit too slow. So again, you want that ear to snap off the stalk roughly about halfway up those deck plates. That's going to have a lot to do with your ground speed. So the faster you drive, the faster you're going to have your header running. So again, it's just like with the combine making adjustments, it's a balance. You got to have the correct head speed, the correct head height, the correct head fore-aft pitch, and the correct deck plate spacing to optimize your corn head.
Like Lucas is saying, it's very important to match your header speed to your ground speed. You just adjust your reel raise lower button on your combine to adjust your head speed, and then adjust our deck plates for pushing our fore-aft or reel fore-aft button or deck plate fore-aft button. But like you said, you want it to come down in the middle. Our deck plate spacing, correct deck plate spacing, will have a slightly wider opening at the front to help funnel that crop in, and it's going to be slightly narrower at the back. So if you were to put a tape measure, it's around a 1/16 of an inch or 2 millimeter difference, but that helps us funnel that crop up into between the stalk rolls, and we want that ear to hit in the middle. Now, if your stalk rolls are worn, that stalk won't get processed till farther back and can cause some unnecessary butt shelling or bridging back, hairpinning back here at the back of the plate on the row unit because it's not grabbing that stalk when it's supposed to. So a couple adjustments and a wear point to keep in mind when you're working on your corn head.
Going back to that balance, so also trash intake is definitely an adjustment from your deck plates and your head speed and your head height. So the less material you can take into the combine, the less work, so to speak, the combine's going to have to do to try to separate the kernels from that trash. So the more trash you take in, the harder your combine's going to have to work to try to separate that out, and the more potential you have for loss. So by having the correct head speed and deck plate spacing, we can minimize butt shelling, minimize trash intake, and get our corn head optimized so that it's kind of like your offensive line. They provide the groundwork so that the running back or the quarterback can do their job. If you get your header set right, then your combine is going to be able to do its job to its full maximum performance as well. If we kind of look on back here just a little bit further, we did find an ear on the ground here before it got behind the combine. So it was laying about right in here. I think we actually picked it up, but it was laying about right in here. So it never actually made it through the combine, and that ear was partially shelled. Well, we know it didn't come through the machine, so it had to have done the head, and our suspicion is that when the head was down, the snout didn't pick that ear up. that ear came underneath of the combine and it hit those chopping knives, and that scattered it. So laying here, Chris, I'll let you talk about the square.
So when we look for losses, we want to measure in a 1 foot by 1 foot area. So we had these made up. It's a little piece of 1 by 2, and we just nailed them together. We just tossed them randomly on the ground, and then we want to look and see what loss we have inside this square foot. So we're going to pick up the mog or our trash. We're going to pick it straight up, let the wind blow it away. We want to make sure that we don't disturb any of the kernels by brushing it away. You can brush some grain out of the way, so we just want to pick it up and when in that area, and then we can leave a little bit of that fine leaf material in there. We're going to lay that back down, and we can pan around in the spot and see what we got for loss. In this particular spot, we got 1 kernel of corn in our 1 foot by 1 foot square. Now, 1 kernel of corn is pretty good. We want to see less than 4 kernels per square foot. That would put us around a 1% loss, or just over a bushel per acre.
So here's an example. This ear did not get picked up by the corn head. It was actually smashed down in the tire print. So you can see that it was smushed down, and it may have potentially been laying there on the ground. You can start to see the fungus start to form on there. So this one, you know, probably wasn't too far away from this one that I found in front of the combine, behind the head. So the chopping knives hit that and cut it, and it shattered that grain and scattered it out. So that's a lot. Some of what we're seeing is probably that. Again, you have this turns into this after it gets hit by the head. So again, those pre-harvest losses, those header losses, we've got to take those into account when we're figuring out total combine loss and trying to correct for it. So we can adjust the combine all day, and we're never going to fix this because we haven't adjusted the head.
That's right. So we do have higher head loss than we like, but we're still going to look behind the combine just in case we got a spot where we don't have a high head loss, and see what we got. And then we're going to raise the chopper, and we're going to look inside the machine and see our shoe distribution and our conveyor auger distribution, and see if we can improve the performance of the combine as well.
So when you do throw this out behind the combine, if you've done that power shutdown, you don't want to do it directly behind the combine. It does take a little bit of time, even though you go to low throttle and you shut everything down. It does take a little bit of time for that machine to actually, the inertia to actually stop. So doing it right behind the combine might give you misinformation on what the combine is actually doing. So you want to walk back a few yards back behind the combine to make sure that you're not having that impacted by just the inertia of the combine slowing down.
So we're going to come back here, and we're going to see what, and use our 1 foot by 1 foot again. We're going to pick up our leaf material, let the wind do all the hard work, and then we're going to see what we got on the ground. Now you can see here in this piece of kernel of corn, it went through the chopper, so we know that's combine loss because it's damaged. And then you can see the other half of it right here next to it. But this here is a full kernel of corn, so it could still made it through the chopper as well. But in this particular 4x4 or 1 by 1 foot square, we have roughly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces of corn in this square foot. Now, all this was on top of some of this leaf material. It is in the tire track, but none of it was embedded into the ground. So we know in this certain instance, this wasn't header loss, or otherwise that tire print would have embedded it into the ground. What'd you find, Lucas?
So over here, again, it's important to look in more than one place. So over here, I did similar to what Chris did. I did find a couple little broken pieces. So we know that those did come through the machine. But looking at whole kernels of corn, I've only got 2 right here. So I've got 1, 2, and I'm basically almost directly in the center of the machine. Okay, so I'm more over right in the middle of the machine. And I found 2 plus a couple little broken pieces. We'll call that 2.5. So Chris had 6, I had 2.5. So we'll call that roughly about 4 kernels for easy figuring. So again, you want to look in several different places, take an average, and kind of get an average of what that is. So we're going to say we have an average of 4. Now again, it probably wouldn't hurt to look in a couple more places just to verify what we've got. But we're going to say we've got 4 kernels. Now, if you look on John Deere's app, it's called the Equipment Plus app. And what it will allow you to do is it will allow you to put in some specifications. So I pull that Equipment Plus app up, and I've gone into the tools section of that, and I put in there that I've got a 30-foot head. I put in roughly what my corn was yielding. I put in, you know, that I'm actually in the spread position right now. So our chopper is actually down just for the initial. We want to look at an initial setting here. And then, so we had 4 kernels of loss in a 1 by 1 foot square was our average. And I'm going to hit the calculate loss button, and that says 0.97%, okay, or roughly about 2.28 bushels. I don't know that anybody's going to be satisfied with that kind of performance, so we've got some adjustments that we've got to make. Now, again, we don't really know at this point how much of it is coming through the combine versus the head. We've done some comparisons right now, but because we're in a spread application with the chopper, it's hard to know, is it coming still on the cob? Is it just free grain that's already been threshed? We know we do have some header loss. So there's some adjustments that we're gonna have to make because we need to improve what we've got cooking here. So we're gonna allow us to make one adjustment. We can make one adjustment on the head, and we can make one adjustment on the combine. Making multiple adjustments at a time is kind of dangerous to do because you don't typically know 100%, okay, if I went the wrong way, well, did one of them help and one of them hurt? Or if I didn't see much difference, again, did one of them help and one of them hurt? Or did it get worse? Did it get better? I don't know what adjustment really helped me or hurt me if I'm making multiple adjustments. So I want to make one adjustment on the head, and I'm going to make one adjustment to the combine.
All right, so we are doing our power shutdown, and we just want to take a quick peek with the chopper raise and see what our shoe distribution is, see if we can improve that. Too early to, we're going to make some other adjustments we already determined, so we know we're not doing too much to the combine yet, but we just still want to see what we got going on. So as you can see, looking up in the front of the combine, 3 of our 4 bays are pretty full, and I suspect just during the natural process of the power shutdown, this bay here that's empty kind of cleaned itself out. But we have pretty good shoe load up front there. Looking on the front of the rear of the shoe auger bed there, it's pretty even distribution across the cleaning shoe. Now, we also want to look and see if we have any full ears in here or any rotor loss that might have made it through the combine that didn't make it into the chopper just yet. But all these are pretty clean. So we do have one right here. So we are getting a little bit of rotor loss coming out of the combine. So let's get out, we'll regroup. We're going to talk about what adjustments we're going to make, and we'll do another power shutdown. All right, so we want to talk about a little bit what we can do if we don't have uneven shoe distribution. During our power shutdown, we were looking up the back of the combine, up through right in this area, at the back of the conveying augers. When we did our power shutdowns, we're pretty level across there. One adjustment you can make if you are not level is by pulling these dividers up right here. That's going to catch the material that's going into this outer auger and funnel it down into the center. Both sides of the combine have those. For our video, they were slightly up about an inch from the factory. They come all the way down. So that's one thing that we can do that's going to pull that material into the center from the outside bays of the chaffer. We want to keep that shoe load even all the way across the combine. Takes 4 15mm bolts, just slightly loosen them up right here on each side, and then you can pull that divider up to the position that you need it to be in. Walking around some more after we looked at our shoe distribution, went back up to the head. We pulled this out of the corn head, so we have some smaller ears in this part of the field. Here's one we found behind the combine. Our cob's actually substantially smaller on the ones we're finding with grain. It's measuring 19, 18, or 20, and some of them don't have very much kernel depth. So we don't see any splits when we're looking behind the cob. We see a lot of, or behind the combine, we see a lot of full cobs, and we don't have much of a damage in the core of the cob. So we're going to close our concave down a little bit to help compensate with this loss that we're finding on the ground behind the combine.
So what Chris is talking about when he's saying splits, so that sometimes that can be a not necessarily understood term. So what we're not talking about is a broken cob. So broken, I mean like that. Okay, that's broken in thirds or in fourths or whatever. You would expect to see that out of an STS machine. Okay, what we're talking about when we say we don't want to see splits would be if I took a fillet knife and I took this cob and I just filleted it just like this to where I split it open like a banana. Okay, if you see that, that means that if you see lots of that, now you may see one here and there, but if you see a high percentage of that, then that's when you know that you've reached your concave is a little bit too tight. Okay, so what happens is when that concave, those threshing elements come around, that cob should roll on that concave like I'm simulating right now. If that concave clearance is too tight, what'll happen is it'll catch, and then that threshing element will actually split it. So then it looks like it's been filleted with a knife longitudinally rather than broken like that. That's okay. When you see that coming out of the back of the machine, that's okay. If it's split longitudinally, that is an indication of your concave being too tight. So I think the adjustment we're going to make based on what we're seeing here, again, we make one adjustment in the head, we make one adjustment in the combine. So our combine adjustment is we're going to tighten our concave up a little bit. And our header adjustment is we're going to tighten up our deck plates a little bit. And I'm thinking we're probably going to go probably 3 on our concave. So we were at 22 currently, so we're probably going to go down to 19. And on our header, I think we're on a setting of 3 on our deck plate, so we're probably going to go down to at least 2, maybe a little bit less than 2. And then we're going to do another power shutdown.
On our second power shutdown, we're going to leave the chopper in the raised position. So we're going to windrow what's coming off the back of the combine, and that's going to really help us determine if some of those ears that we're seeing on the ground that are more full of corn are actual head loss or pre-harvest loss. And then we're going to isolate to what the combine's doing in between the width of the cleaning chute, because it's going to be dumping right on the ground and creating a windrow.
And the reason we want that chopper up is the chopper can also be a threshing machine, okay? So if I've got kernels left on a cob, many times I can mask that by having the chopper down. So I've got kernels on the cob coming out of the rotor, and then it hits the chopper. Well, the chopper will go ahead and thresh that, and then what I see on the ground is a bare cob. And I don't really understand that, oh, I still have out of my rotor, I still have kernels still left on that cob because the chopper threshed it the rest of the way. So it gives me misinformation that I can't use to get my combine set correctly. So that's why we want to have that chopper up when we do those power shutdowns.
So we're going to talk about starting up our combine after doing our first power shutdown. So we're going to come in here, we're going to kick our separator on, we're going to pretty much go straight to high idle, then we're going to idle back down and go to idle, kick our header on, go right at the high idle. We want to do the best job we can cleaning out the machine, and that's pretty much the only way that we can do it. So here we go. So we just cleaned out our separator. We're going to go back down to idle. We're going to kick on our head. Give it a second, and then we're going to go right up to high idle again, help clean that out, and then we're going to do our next power shutdown, see what we got. So we did our second power shutdown. We're on the right-hand side of the combine right now, and we see this full ear corn that's been cut just sitting on top of the ground here. We know that's going to be something that we couldn't pick up by the snout that the chopper on the corn head hit, and it's what scattered a lot of this grain around and split this ear open. Now we've looked in other areas around the head. We got a couple more pans thrown. There's very little free grain now behind the head. Closing down our deck plates helped a lot. To combat this, we're going to tip our head forward slightly and lower it just a little bit. We are pretty low on the ground right now, but we're pretty flat, so tipping that forward will help that ear go up the snout instead of get pushed to the side. So we're going to tip it forward. Hopefully we can catch some more of these ears. Just as late in the year as it is and how dry the corn is, this is something that is going to be pretty common when you got the stalk broke off and the ear laying on the ground.
So again, it is important to make sure that you look behind the head and take that into account, because the combine, again, you can adjust all day on the combine, but if your losses are coming from the header, all those adjustments aren't going to really matter, and you're going to be confused as to where those losses are actually coming from. You can see we threw another pan down here, a square, a 1 foot square, and we're not really seeing much of anything else other than every now and then you see these ears that are scattered. So I think we've cleaned up most of our head loss. Like Chris mentioned, our one adjustment we're going to do this time, we're actually going to pitch that head forward a little bit and lower it down just to try to scoop up a few more of those loose ears. But I think after that, hopefully we've got our header in line. So now we're going to go take a quick look behind the combine and we'll see how it's doing.
So as we were walking towards the back of the machine, we glanced under the machine. We saw a lot of free grain piled right there underneath the fan. It's always a good spot to look prior to get behind the combine. Maybe we left the conveyor auger clean outdoors open or something like that. But in this instance, that's free grain coming out of the cleaning fan from doing our power shutdown. That's going to be pretty normal in corn. We have a lot of high yielding corn. So we're not going to worry about that too much. We just want to point it out that is something you might find when you do that power shutdown. So you see we did our power shutdown. We got that windrow going out of the back of the combine. We're not spreading nothing. But right here, we have another one of those ears that were hit by the corn head chopper. So just want to take that account. Even though we did see it behind the combine, our chopper's still raised. This would be considered header loss. And we're going to try to combat with the adjustment of tipping it forward and lowering it closer to the ground. So we're looking at the back of the combine, up inside the combine again after our second power shutdown. We look forward here. Our distribution's still pretty good. Maybe a little heavier on the right this side this time, but the left three bays are cleaned out pretty well. So we're going to call that pretty good distribution still. You can see up at the rear of the conveying augers, pretty even across there, so we're going to call that pretty good distribution. Back here, back at the cleaning shoe where the discharge beater's dumping that material off, we did find one chunk of an ear with a little bit of corn still on it, so we're going to measure that cob and see what might have happened there. But this is towards the end of our power shutdown, so maybe that was a little bit of not having the machine full enough when we found this. But we'll get on the ground, look in our windrow, see if we find any more, and see how we go. Otherwise, looking pretty good. There are a couple free kernels here. Got one, maybe two. Other than that,
So Chris did find that one cob that still had some kernels on it there in the back of the combine. So we're out probably 20 yards, 15, 20 yards behind the machine now. And we've thrown our 1 foot square box down here and we're looking for free grain. So we are in the windrow here. So I'm looking in my square box and there's roughly about five or so kernels in there that I'm seeing. So we also did another spot over here more directly in the center of the combine. And there's several more kernels. So I'm counting in here, I'm counting 2, 4, 6, 8, about 10 probably. So I'm between 5 and 10. I had 5 over there, I have 10 here. So I'm gonna average that. And I'm gonna say that we're at 7.5. Now my app won't let me do that, so I'm gonna round up to 8. Now, the one thing that we do need to make sure on the app is we now are in a windrow situation. So on your app, there's the option to choose spread. So that would be if you're actually letting the chopper spread the crop. We're now doing a windrow. So if we're in a spread mode, it's going to have a tendency to throw that corn and spread it more evenly across the back of the machine. But in a windrow situation, you're going to expect all that to be concentrated in the middle of the machine because we don't have the chopper engaged. So we have to make sure that we're checking windrow. So I'm going to hit calculate loss. Okay, we're down to 0.3% and we're roughly at about 3/4 of a bushel loss. Okay, now there's a couple things that we need to notice. So looking over here on the ground right here, we did find some cob. Remember Chris found the one in the back of the machine that was laying on right before the chopper, and we found a couple of these laying out on the ground. So again, what that's telling me is we're not 100% getting it threshed. Now again, if we'd have had the chopper engaged, the chopper might have threshed this. Again, our kernel depth is not very much, and I can just take my thumb and that stuff just falls off, okay? So the chopper potentially could have threshed this. So that's why it's important that during that power shutdown, you want to make sure that chopper is in the raised position. So I've gone around and I've gathered up some more cobs. And again, I'm not seeing any splits. I was looking really hard trying to find some splits. Again, some of these are broken. Some of them are broken. So again, broken is like that. But I don't have any of those longitudinal splits. Again, I was trying to find some and I was unsuccessful in finding any. So what that means is I have not reached the tightest position that I can on my chopper, or on my concave, excuse me. So I could actually go a little tighter on my concave if that's what we choose to do. I've got a little bit more room. Another thing you can look at to look at that concave setting is if you look right at the end of that cob, it doesn't really look like there's any kind of where it looks like it's broken or starting to split. So what you might see in the pith, you might see a vertical or a horizontal line start to form. If you start to see that, you're approaching where if you go much tighter, it potentially could start to split those cobs. But I'm not seeing any of that out here on the ground. So if we choose to do that, then we could go a little bit tighter on that concave. And but we've got enough free grain out here. Again, we've helped it substantially. So we were at almost a full percent, and now we're down to about 1/3%. But I think we can clean this up even a little bit more versus what we have now. So we'll go ahead and we'll rejoin Chris, and we'll talk about what adjustments we want to make now, and we'll do another power shutdown.
All right, so as Lucas mentioned, found a little bit of free grain on the ground, not too much. Our loss percentage is pretty low, but we're still going to try to clean that up, get that free grain off the cob of the ear. So we're going to close our concave down another 2 millimeter. So right now we're at 19, so we're going to get down to 17, and then we're going to tip our head forward a little bit to get those points closer to the ground, and we're going to lower it down a little bit for our header adjustment, so we can hopefully scoop up those ears that are broke off and laying closer to the ground. So we're going to do another power shutdown, see what we got going. All right, so we did our third power shutdown now this time, second one with the chopper raised. We're not finding that much back here on the tailboard. Just want to talk about what we want to look at in here one more time. Our distribution way up front is pretty full all the way across, so that's good. Our chaffer bays right off of the air box is pretty clean. There's nothing in this bay, nothing really in this bay. This bay has a little bit of leaf material in it, and this bay is pretty much cleaned out. So when we do our power shutdown, we want these to be pretty clean like we're seeing. That indicates our chaffer is open enough and our material's falling down into the cleaning chute to go into the sieve to clean it one more time to separate our tailings from our clean grain. So what we're seeing back here is pretty good. Let's go talk about what we see on the ground.
So guys, we're still seeing roughly about the same amount of kernels on the ground, roughly that 8 kernels, which again translates to about 3/10%. So we didn't really help that a lot, but what we did help was we've looked behind the combine extensively, and we're not finding any cobs that still have corn attached to them. So we definitely have solved that problem, and I think we're pretty good on that part of it. But Chris has also got some things we want to look at on these cobs.
So when you see these cobs here, they're pretty smashed flat, more of an oval. It indicates they got rubbed off pretty well. This is one of the bigger cobs that we found out here, and you are starting to see that split. We didn't break it off, so we know we're not too tight, but we know we can't go any tighter because we don't want these to break and split and overload our cleaning chute. We did find this one with some immature kernels on here, but we did clean off all the other kernels off that, so that's good. But overall, what we're seeing on our cob condition would be what we're looking for. Really smash getting that cleaned up.
So we didn't find any splits. Again, we looked very extensively to try to find some that were split. This one was the closest one that we found to actually being split. And again, our goal is to make sure that it's getting 100% threshed. We got to get that done. So if it doesn't come off the cob, the back of the rotor is not going to fix that for us. So we have to get that concave tight enough to where we're getting all of those kernels off of that cob. And we've successfully done that. So we're getting better. We're starting to get to where we're starting to get more of a fine-tuned position now. And so we've talked about what adjustments we want to make. So go ahead, Chris.
So we're going to speed our rotor up a little bit to help combat some of that free grain, get that spun out of that leaf material husk that's still in the rotor cage in our separation section. So we're going to speed our rotor up. We're at 340-ish right now. We're probably going to go 360, 370, and to help with that. Now our header loss, our header loss is cleaned up pretty well. We still see a few ears, full ears that got nicked by the chopping corn head, but we're going to have to make some more adjustments to the corn head. We tipped it forward to a +1 and lowered it down a little bit, but now we're starting to push. The snout's starting to push, make piles of leaves and trash at the point of the divider. So we're going to raise it up a little bit, tip it a little farther forward. So we're just really dragging that point on the ground to help pick up some of those down ears.
So again, when you get down to where you have it completely threshed, you've reached where your concave is optimized. So now to try to clean up this free grain, our next adjustment in that rotor is we've got to spin it faster. That creates more centrifugal force, so the heavier grain is going to be thrown to the outside, and then it's going to go through the grates, and it's going to actually fall down on our chaffer at that point. So again, our concave is optimized. Now, many of you are probably thinking, well, I've never been down to 17 on my concave. Most of the time I'm up around 30, and that is common. 30 is very common. But with what the combine is telling us, and that's why we have to use power shutdowns, there's rules of thumbs, there's things to go by, there's guidelines to look at. But at the end of the day, doing a power shutdown, the combine and the crop are telling you what it needs to get cleaned up. And what we're finding is with the size of the cobs that we were dealing with, we had to go down to that smaller number to go ahead and get that kernel all completely removed from the cob. Now that it's removed completely from the cob, now we can start to focus on the free grain that's left on the ground.
And if we had if all our cobs were this size diameter, we didn't have any of these real small cobs, we could probably run into that concave at the upper 20s, 28, what you're used to. But since we have so much variability in our cob, we got to make sure we get the smaller ones threshed without damaging the big ones, so we don't have all that loss coming out of the back of the cob. All right, so we just want to show why we're adjusting the corn head. You can see I backed up a little bit so you can really see it. About 2 feet in front of the corn head point, there's that mound of leaf material. So we're going to try to raise that up, tip it up a little bit more to help eliminate that buildup there. All right, so we did our fourth power shutdown.
At least
fourth power shutdown. We got 5 kernels per square foot after we increased our rotor speed to 370. That's about half a bushel an acre loss, less pretty low. Now you could dial it in some more if you want to speed your rotor up some more, but that's going to induce grain damage. But we're pretty happy with our less than half a bushel loss. We didn't see nothing on the loss monitors in the cab, no shoe loss, no rotor loss. So we're going to lower the chopper and we're going to do another power shutdown where we're going to investigate our grain tank sample, our tailings, and verify our shoe loss monitors are working now that we lower the chopper.
So again, guys, like Chris said, we've got it cleaned up to where we're under a half a bushel to acre. This corn's making 230, 240 in that range. So we've got it down to we're 0.19%, so less than a quarter of a percent, less than a half a bushel. So again, you can chase your tail from here on. At the end of the day, we got to get some corn shelled too, and we need to get some productivity. So again, you can potentially speed your rotor up a little bit more to try to get a few more of these. But like Chris said, you potentially could start to damage it. But now that we've got all the corn in the combine, that's step one, is get all the corn in the combine. Now we're going to start to look at our grain quality. So are we cracking corn? Do we have a lot of trash in the tank? What do we need to do to make sure that we're not getting docked at the elevator? This corn's actually going into a bin. So we want to make sure that we have the least amount of trash as possible so we don't have some unexpected spoilage or something like that. So again, step one, we got to get it in the combine, which we've done. We've cleaned up the ground. So now we're going to start working on cleaning up our grain tank.
We did mention adjusting the head has helped our whole ear loss. We've been able to pick up most of those now. We're seeing a lot less of those still sitting on the ground. could be we're in a different spot of the field, but we'll see that when we go back around again. But our head loss is doing pretty good. So we're going to go in, we're going to do another power shutdown. We'll start investigating our grain quality.
So now that we've got our ground cleaned up, we want to take a look and see what's going on inside the combine. So we went up in the top of the grain tank and we took a big scoop, coffee can scoop in there, and we've dumped that in this pan. And then over here, Chris went to our tailings return and we dumped our return elevator door. We just opened the door on the outside of the combine and just dumped everything that was in there laying in here. So if we look at our clean grain sample, I am seeing a few leafy, a little bit of leafy things right here. I'm seeing a few, not much at all. I'm also seeing just a few cracks and brokens, like there's a crack and broken there. So I am seeing a few, but overall doing a really decent job.
So I did a power shutdown so we could get the tailings before it cleaned out. We got a little bit of free grain in here, but a lot of leaf material. So a little bit more leaf material than I like. Our tailings monitor in the cab doesn't really indicate we're seeing much, so that's good though. It is not an overlot abundance of tailings, but there is some in here. So to help correct that, we're gonna try to clean this leaf material up by blowing the fan a little faster. We're not seeing much on the ground, so I think we can stand to blow the fan a little harder to help blow some of this leaf material out before it even falls down into the sieve, on top of the sieve.
I also did a spot check with a couple of our 1x1 squares, and I was seeing either nothing or up to 1 at the very most that I saw. So our losses, when I checked our calculator, 1 or 0 is what I was seeing. If it's 1, it's 1/4% or roughly that half a bushel. If it's 0, obviously 0. So if we said it was half or even up to 3/4 of 1 kernel per square foot. So again, we are in the spread position. So that's why it went from 5 down to 0 or 1, because we're spreading it over the entire width of the head now. But our losses really haven't changed according to my calculator. So our combine is still set properly with the chopper down. But our next thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and try to clean up, maybe get some more of this out, this little leafy stuff, get some more of that out by turning our fan up. What you got there, Chris?
This looks like it came from the head. It's threshing so easily. It was right here, right in the next to the row, so we know that the head hit that, so we're not going to worry about that too much. I did set our loss monitor during this last pass. We weren't showing much for loss on the loss monitors for shoe loss or rotor loss, but it was a set of pretty high numbers, almost 28. So I set it to current, and it brought us down to 12, so we're really sensitive there. And we're running in our normal operating range now for our loss monitor. But as Lucas did the ground truth test, we're still under that 1 to 2 in the square foot, so that's good for our overall percentage and bushel per acre loss. Our corn is anywhere from 230 to 240, and it's pretty dry, 14%. So not too much we can do about it. But we're going to try and improve our tailings, and our clean grain sample looks pretty good. So we just want to talk about a little bit if you encounter some shoe loss or a dirty grain tank sample, what kind of adjustments you can make to help improve that. If you do a power shutdown and see a bunch of free grain on your tailboard, or there's a bunch of free grain or material on the base of the chaffer up to halfway back, then that's an indication that our chaffer setting is too far close. So we need to open that up to help eliminate and keep that grain inside the combine, because once it goes over the chopper, it's on the ground, it's lost grain, we're not going to recoup it back. So we want to keep as much as we possibly can in the combine. So our chaffer setting when we were doing our video during our video was like 18 millimeters or 19 millimeters, I think. So it's fairly open, it's in the middle of the road. So if we would have saw grain during our power shutdowns where these dividers start, these dividers right here, where that divider starts, or maybe even slightly farther forward, that would indicate that our chaffer opening is not big enough. So we would increase our chaffer. And if the grain was making it all the way back here to the back of on the tailboard, then we really need to increase our chaffer. Now, if our sample's dirty, we got two options. We can close our chaffer down a little bit depending on what our tailings level is, or we can close our sieve down a little bit. So if we close our sieve down, we're going to increase our tailings. That trash hopefully gets reprocessed through either our rethresher on an 80 or 90, or dump back into the rotor on a 60 or 70, and that tailings gets reprocessed. So as long as our tailing level is low, my recommendation would be to close your sieve down a little bit to help clean up that grain tank sample. But if you're already running a lot of tailings, then we need to close down our chaffer. So one really important thing that can help affect our tailings is this back 15 to 20 louvers back here. See our sieve ends right here at where those start. So anything that comes and goes down through here is going right into tailings. So that will increase our tailings load. So we want to make that sure that's set to 5 millimeter or less. If it's too far open, that stick and mog material is going right down into our tailings. Some other adjustments that we can make in our cleaning shoe on an 80 or a 90 is to take that front chaffer extension out that's right up here. If you're in some green stem soybeans, and that's maybe you're getting some stalks in another crop that's bridging up, they'll get jammed in there and they'll bridge up. They kind of create like a dam, an air dam, so really get a dirty sample, and we can't clean as well on our chaffer. You would take that out when those are bridged up to help those those stalks and stuff come out to the back of the combine and not bridge up the material inside the combine. So we did another power shutdown. We increased the fan speed from 1250 to 1300. The loss monitor did jump up a little bit, so we know we don't want to increase our cleaning fan speed anymore. But overall, pretty happy with what we got here. We cleaned up some of this leaf material, but there's a lot less free grain in here too. So we're able to increasing that fan speed, held that crop mat up a little bit more, and helped separate it out so we're not putting so much into the tailings, but we're getting it down into the clean grain.
So even though the loss monitor jumped up a little bit, I did ground truth it. And again, I'm still seeing that 0 up to once in a while I would find 1 in a square foot. So we really haven't increased our losses. When we increase that, based on our loss monitor, it may have been, we had some tips or something. We may be seeing a little bit more cob that we've taken out of here now. So that might be an answer to what that could potentially be. But I did ground truth it to make sure that we weren't, by increasing that fan speed, that we weren't putting any more on the ground, and we weren't. So in the clean grain sample, again, we've got some leafy material. We do have some little bitty tips of cob here. Typically what's causing this is as those tines come around, they can actually pinch that cob, and they can actually flick a chunk out of that. So typically what's causing this is rotor speed. So we could slow our rotor down, but what we found was when we sped our rotor up to its current position, we reduced the amount of losses we had on the ground substantially. We went from about 8 down to that 5. So we went from about 4 to 5/10% down to that 0.2% or less. So we definitely reduced our losses when we sped our rotor up, and a few little bits of cob that we're finding in here is not going to be of any consequence. So anyway, we cleaned up some of the leafy material, and there's less free grain in our tailings. So I think we're pretty happy with what we've got right now. Our grain tank looks good. Our losses on the ground are good. So really it's about time to button things up and get going. Anything last thing to add, Chris?
I can't think of anything.
So guys, I guess just kind of to close and wrap up, always clean up the ground first. So again, don't forget to check your header losses before you start inspecting for your combine losses. You have to take those into account. So clean up those header losses and make sure you account for them when you're looking behind the combine. Use that Equipment Plus app, so that way you can calculate what your losses actually are, and you can know, okay, what's the difference between spread versus non-spread with that chopper raise when you're doing those power shutdowns. Again, on those power shutdowns, make sure that that chopper is up so that it's not masking any unthreshed. So in corn or even in soybeans, when that chopper is down, it is a threshing machine. So when that material goes through that chopper, it could thresh it, even though the combine didn't, and it could mask a problem. So you want to make sure that chopper's up when you're doing those power shutdowns. And again, make one adjustment at a time on the head, make one adjustment at a time on the combine.
Yep, and overall, it took us what we messed around and did a lot of talking and stuff today, but it took us less than 2 hours to do all of this, 5, 6 power shutdowns and talking through it and getting our samples and stuff. So one power shutdown a day or whenever you want to do them doesn't take that much time, and it seems like a lot, but to get out and do that ground truth check, do a power shutdown, see what's actually happening in the machine, it seems like a daunting task, but it's pretty simple, and hopefully we explained that for you today on how easy it can be.
And guys, again, Chris talked about, we spent 2 hours, but we spent a lot of time, before we turned the camera on, getting this kind of stuff set up, looking at finding our ground truth with our squares here. And, typically if you spend 30 minutes the very first time you go out to get that combine set, you'll arrive at your answer because you're going to know what to do and you're going to actually have good information so that you can make that decision. So again, make sure you look at our other videos that talks about crop flow. So again, we talked about that, okay, the clean grain has to go through the sieve to get to the grain tank. The tailings, it went through the chaffer, but it didn't make it through the sieve, so it went into return. Understanding that crop flow is going to also help you understand what adjustments to make on the machine. So I guess to close, if we wanted to clean this up, maybe what we might do, we might close down that top chaffer, maybe to try to let a little bit more of this trash go out and not wind up. However, our ground losses, if we close down the chaffer and we saw our ground losses go up, that would be an indication that we've reached our minimum on our chaffer. So we could do that to try to clean this up. And then maybe that would also reduce some of the we're seeing in return, but very, very little in our return. And our grain tank overall looks really good. So we're probably going to call it good and get rolling.
Thanks for watching, coming out with us today in our combine series. If you haven't done so, go back and watch some of our other videos, such as concave leveling, power shutdown, crop flow, combine settings adjust. Feel like there's a lot of valuable information out there we can share with you.
Yep. So again, thanks for watching, and we appreciate it. Again, if you got any specific questions, don't be afraid to call your local Sloan implement dealer. They can help you with any specific questions that you might have. And again, we wish you a safe and successful harvest.